HOA Karen calls the police on a farmer and gets a humiliating end. Before we jump into today's story, I'd like to ask you to take just a second and hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to me, and it motivates me to keep bringing you more epic HOA drama and thrilling stories. So go ahead, click subscribe, and let's get into the action. Luke Thompson had always loved the quiet life on his family farm. His sprawling land, passed down through generations, was his sanctuary. Surrounded by the sounds of nature, rustling trees, distant animals, and the morning crow of his rooster, he felt at peace. However, his tranquility was about to be disrupted by a force more persistent than a summer drought, Karen Whitmore, the self-appointed queen of the neighboring Crestwood Estates Homeowners Association, HOA. One crisp morning, while sipping his coffee on the porch, Luke noticed a sleek car pull up near his farm's boundary. Out stepped Karen, immaculately dressed in a beige pantsuit, clipboard in hand. She marched towards his porch with an air of authority, the faintest hint of a smile on her lips. Luke raised an eyebrow as she introduced herself with an overly formal tone, as if she were a corporate representative about to make a deal. "Mr. Thompson, I'm Karen Whitmore, president of Crestwood Estates HOA," she began. "I'd like to discuss some concerns about your property." Her words were clipped, cold, and utterly unapologetic. Luke took a slow sip of his coffee, his eyes never leaving hers. "You've got my attention," he replied, already sensing this would not be a casual conversation. Karen wasn't the type to take no for an answer, and she wasn't about to let a small detail like the law stop her from pushing her agenda. Over the next few weeks, Luke found his mailbox brimming with official-looking letters, each more absurd than the last. The HOA's legal team, under Karen's direction, demanded that he repaint his barn, claiming the red color clashed with neighborhood aesthetics. The rooster, they said, was a violation of noise regulations. His goats and chickens, apparently, they didn't belong in the suburban view either. Each letter came with an air of arrogance, as if they believed Luke had no choice but to comply. But Luke wasn't intimidated. He ignored their threats, assuming that Karen would eventually tire of this petty game. However, when county inspectors showed up on his property, claiming he was in violation of health and zoning codes, he knew she wasn't backing down. The inspectors were courteous but bewildered. "This is the cleanest farm I've ever seen," one remarked after inspecting the barns and pens. It was clear, these complaints were groundless. Not long after, things took a darker turn. One afternoon, as Luke was walking through his fields, he noticed a drone buzzing overhead. His suspicion was instant. Who would be flying a drone over his property? A private investigator, hired by Karen, was perched on a nearby hill, snapping photos. Luke strode over to the hill, his boots crunching the grass beneath him. When he confronted the investigator, the man stammered nervously, clearly caught off guard. "Just checking on a property dispute," he mumbled. Luke, eyes narrowing, didn't let him off the hook. "This is private property. You're trespassing." Luke's voice was low and controlled, but the words hit hard. The investigator quickly packed up, avoiding eye contact. This wasn't just harassment anymore, this was personal. Luke had had enough. He wasn't going to let Karen's relentless harassment take away the peace he'd worked so hard to build on his land. If she wanted to turn his life into a living nightmare, then he'd give her a taste of her own medicine. First, he decided to get creative with the roosters. Karen had made several complaints about the early morning crowing. So Luke bought 3 more roosters. He placed them strategically along his property line, ensuring that every morning at exactly 5 a.m., a cacophony of crowing would echo through the stillness of Crestwood Estates. The noise was deafening. He didn't even try to quiet them down, after all. They were his animals, living their natural lives. Let Karen complain all she wanted. Next, Luke turned his attention to the view. Karen had complained that the sight of his farm's fields and animals was an eyesore. So, Luke planted a massive patch of bright yellow sunflowers right along the property line, creating a wall of vibrant flowers. Now, instead of a neat, manicured suburban lawn, Karen had to look at a field of sunflowers taller than her fence, blocking her view and creating an impenetrable barrier. But Luke's boldest move came when he decided to host a farmer's market on his land. He put up flyers around town: Farmers Fun Day, free entry, come meet the animals. The event was a hit. Local families flocked to the market, excited to meet the animals, buy fresh produce, and enjoy a day out in the countryside. It wasn't just a market, it was a loud, lively event that carried music, chatter, and the cheerful sound of children playing. It was exactly the kind of spectacle Karen had hoped to avoid. When Karen showed up, her face was flushed with fury. "This is completely unacceptable," she screeched, her clipboard waving like a weapon. "You can't turn your property into a public spectacle." Luke, grinning, crossed his arms. "Actually, I can. My property is zoned for this. It's all perfectly legal." Karen's eyes narrowed, her patience clearly wearing thin. "You'll regret this," she muttered. But before she could make any more threats, Luke pulled out a stack of legal documents. "This is a cease and desist order," he said calmly. "And if you or anyone from your HOA sets foot on my property again, I'll be calling the sheriff. This is trespassing." "Karen?" Karen's face turned pale. "You wouldn't," she started. But Luke didn't let her finish. "Oh, I would," he said with a smile. "Call them? I'll make it official." That was the moment she realized just how serious Luke was. Karen stormed off, her plans unraveling in front of her. Luke had won this round, and it felt like the tide was finally turning in his favor. The tension in the air was palpable as the Crestwood Estates HOA meeting began. Luke had been invited, though he had no formal stake in the HOA, to present his case. The meeting hall was packed with homeowners, murmuring in anticipation. For the first time in years, the power dynamics in the room felt different. Karen sat at the front, her usual air of smug confidence replaced by a tense, almost defensive posture. She knew what was coming. Luke walked to the front, holding a thick stack of documents. The room quieted as he placed the papers on the table with a loud thud. "These are the legal documents proving that you've been harassing me, trespassing on my property, and filing false complaints," Luke began, his voice steady but cutting through the room. He went on to recount how Karen had attempted to erect a fence on his land without permission, how she had used HOA resources to launch personal attacks against him, and how she had even gone so far as to hire a private investigator to spy on his farm. He laid out the evidence with precision, pointing out the emails, the fake complaints, and the countless times she had abused her position of power. As he spoke, Karen's face grew increasingly red. She tried to interrupt, but the murmurs from the audience grew louder. And one of the board members, a woman named Linda, stood up. "I think we've heard enough," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Karen? This isn't just about a personal dispute anymore. You've made us all complicit in this nonsense." Luke's words hung in the air as the board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. Even those who had once supported Karen were now beginning to look at her with disdain. One by one, they began to speak up. Richard, the HOA president, who had long been a silent ally to Karen, stood and sighed. This has gone too far," he muttered. "I've read the documents. It's clear she's been abusing her power. We can't let this continue." A vote was called. The room was tense, the weight of the decision hanging in the air. Karen's face twisted in disbelief as the votes were counted. The final tally: a resounding vote of no confidence. Karen was removed as president of Crestwood Estates. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You can't do this. I am the HOA. I've kept this community in line," she shouted. But no one was listening anymore. The board members, now free from her rule, looked at each other with a sense of relief. Within days, Karen's house was on the market, and rumors spread like wildfire throughout the neighborhood. People were thrilled. The oppressive, fear-driven atmosphere that had haunted the community for years was suddenly lifted. No more ridiculous fines. No more surveillance. No more petty complaints about the height of fences or the placement of garden gnomes. The town began to thrive. Neighbors, once afraid to speak up, now greeted each other with a sense of camaraderie. Families were finally able to enjoy their backyards without the constant fear of receiving a passive-aggressive letter in the mail. The once sterile, manicured lawns of Crestwood Estates blossomed with personality, and the community became more connected than ever before. As for Karen, her downfall was swift and final. The power she had so desperately clung to crumbled, and with it went the hold she had over the community. Luke had fought back, and in doing so, he had not only reclaimed his own peace but had helped restore freedom to an entire neighborhood. Karen wasn't ready to accept defeat. Her reign over Crestwood Estates had ended, but she couldn't let go of her desire for control. Determined to regain power, she moved to a new town, hoping to start fresh in another HOA community. She quickly sized up the new neighborhood, convinced that her past tactics, manipulation, intimidation, and a carefully crafted persona of authority, would work once more. Little did she know, she had picked the wrong place to try and reassert her dominance in this new community. However, Karen quickly met her match. The HOA president, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Claire, had already been through her own battles with power-hungry individuals. When Karen tried to push her way in, demanding leadership roles and attempting to implement her controlling rules, she was immediately shut down. Claire saw right through Karen's ploys and wasted no time in putting her in her place. "Not here, Karen," Claire told her flatly when Karen tried to rally support from the other homeowners. "We don't run our HOA like that. You'll find no room for your tactics here." In a matter of weeks, Karen's presence in the new neighborhood became intolerable. She was constantly butting heads with residents and complaining about anything that didn't fit her narrow vision of perfection. But instead of intimidating anyone, she was met with resistance at every turn. No one in the community was afraid of her. Before long, Karen found herself out of place once again. The neighborhood's HOA, unwilling to tolerate her divisive behavior, voted her out. And her house was put up for sale. The woman who had once ruled through fear and manipulation was now the one being pushed out. She had underestimated the strength of a community united against her, just as she had done in Crestwood Estates. Meanwhile, back on Luke's farm, life couldn't have been more different. His Karen-free zone sign, proudly displayed at the edge of his property, had become a local landmark. People from all over the town came to take photos in front of the sign, a symbol of Luke's victory over Karen's reign of terror. The sign had turned into a quiet but powerful statement, a reminder that sometimes standing up for what's right can change everything. Luke's farm flourished even more. His weekly farmers' market had grown into a popular community event. And his fields, once seen as an eyesore, were now a picturesque landscape that drew people in. His roosters crowed loudly every morning, not as a nuisance but as a symbol of freedom. The community, now thriving in the absence of Karen's oppressive presence, continued to grow closer, united by the memory of the battle they had all witnessed. And as for Karen, she had left behind a trail of failures, unable to find a place where she could once again seize control. Her attempts to recreate the power she had lost were nothing but echoes of her past. And soon, she faded from the town's memory. Luke, however, would always be remembered as the man who brought down the HOA tyrant and restored peace to his community. The Karen-free zone was a testament to his perseverance, and to the ultimate truth that sometimes karma has a way of making things right. And that's the end of this wild ride. Karen thought she could control everything. But in the end, it was Luke who triumphed. And his farm became a symbol of freedom and justice. What do you think of the story? Do you think Karen got what she deserved? Or could there have been a different outcome? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more HOA drama and epic showdowns, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you never miss a new episode. There are plenty more stories coming your way, and I can't wait to share them with you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.